Outlaw Law is brought to you by Whitaker and Hamer, attorneys and counselors at law. Your law firm for life.
You're locked into the Outlaw Lawyers. Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, managing partners at Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm and hosts of this show. And again, the power behind the program is Whitaker and Hamer. They are practicing attorneys here in North Carolina. We also have joining us from the Morehead City office, Cassandra Nicholas, also an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer. There'll be an opportunity coming up for a free consultation with Whitaker and Hamer, so stay tuned for that. Gentlemen, where are we going next?
Well, I wanted to talk about estate planning, right? Estate planning is something that everybody needs to do, whether you have, $25 million in assets or you're living, a life where you have your real property and you've got kids. Like, everybody needs to do estate planning, and usually we get what would be the word? An avalanche of clients looking to do estate plannings in late December, about this time, January, February. We see a lot of people kind of take the end of the year and the beginning of the year as a time to be like, hey, I'm finally going to do my estate planning, or I'm going to have my estate planning reviewed. I just talked to someone the other day who had a very great estate, a very complex, good estate plan done in 2017. They haven't reviewed it. And fast forward to 2023, a lot of things are different, right? And that doesn't change all of your estate plan. Like, once you get your estate plan in place, usually you're just tweaking it. You're adding things, subtracting things, changing beneficiaries of a trust. If we have a lot of folks who put a lot of stuff in trust, and we'll find out they bought a condo or they bought a car and it didn't make it into the trust, or they got a new life insurance policy and we need to tweak the beneficiaries. So if you haven't done your estate plan, there's no time like the present, right? This, have you ever heard that phrase they do for a tree, the best time to plant a tree? When's the best time to plant a tree?
No.
You've never heard that? Cassandra, have you ever heard that?
Yes.
Oh, see, it's a real thing. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is right now.
Oh, I like how you whispered it. I think when you whisper it, it makes it sound cooler.
If you whisper it,
or you yell it, it's right now. You just can't say it. No, you say it normal. That quote's not good.
No, nobody looks forward to estate planning, and we've at the law firm, we've tried to streamline the process so the process is as pleasant as it could possibly be. We do phone consults, Zoom consults. We usually do end up sitting down with you at least once to actually execute the documents, but we've there's all kinds of reasons why people wait. Joseph, did you ever put off estate planning?
Yeah, man. Yeah, for sure.
I always tell people, I started practicing law in 2003, and it took me like 5 years to actually sit down and do my own estate plan. It cost me no money, right? Because I'm an attorney, I can do my own estate plan. I didn't have to fill out any forms because it was already all in my head, and it still took me several years to sit down and do it.
It took not a lot of time to actually produce it. It's the motivation to do it, right?
Right. So I had young children, and that's what spurred me. We were starting a family, and so I had young children, and so that spurred me to start thinking about doing it. And then that also ended up delaying it because me and my wife didn't agree right away on who the guardians of our young children would be if something happened to both of us, right? And that's that doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen very often where two spouses, parents of children, both die at or about the same time. But that's something we talk about in your estate plan, and a lot of times that holds up folks from getting their estate plan done because they're not in agreement on who guardian of young children should be if something happens to both of them, or if a trust is created for minor children, who the trustee of the trust should be. And so I see that hold a lot of people up.
And that's something that is concerned. Like, that's something you should be concerned about, right? But what's worse than arguing about it is not having it decided ahead of time, and leaving it up to the courts or that's always retain control. That's what estate planning is.
Yeah. Can I ask a real quick question, Josh? So you're having this conversation with your wife. So what was the holdup with your choices, and what was the holdup with her choices? You guys obviously had a disagreement on who you wanted.
Well, I think our disagreement was one that a lot of couples have, because if something happens to me and my wife, we've got 3 young boys, and we have to figure out, like, okay, well, who should be their guardian, right? And so you look to parents, right? We look to their grandparents, our parents. But there's always concerns. Well, how old will they be if something happens to us? And are they just going to have to go to someone else in 5 to 10 years? And so then you kind of look at siblings, right? And then you kind of look at friends, right? But I think that's just you just talk about pros and cons. Like that family already has 5 kids. Do they really want to take our 3 kids? And you kind of get stuck in that.
Gotcha.
Well, and it's tough too because you're talking about giving your kids to somebody, and that's got to be someone who.
It's a huge responsibility.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I've had that conversation with close friends. It was 30 years ago, and it was they had us over for dinner, and then right after the main course, they said, "Hey, we want to talk to you about something. If something were to happen to us, we do travel quite a bit together. We want you to." Raise our kids. It floored us.
Yeah.
At that time, and it was flattering. But then you start thinking, oh my God! You will inherit children at some point if something happens, and it's a worst case scenario. But you do need to plan for it.
Yeah, you don't think about it happening. You don't ever think. You have to think about it, right? We have to think about it, but you don't ever want to think about you and your spouse passing away at the same time, but it happens, man. That what was that story? Batman.
Oh, Batman.
Yeah, you heard about that one?
Yeah.
That's what happened to him.
Yeah.
So
lost both of his.
It's parents. A real thing, man. Yeah, it's a real thing.
And luckily, he had Alfred.
He had Alfred.
Yeah.
I don't have a butler, just in general, much less one that I can leave my kids to.
We need one of these chatbot robot butlers.
I've had these ladies that have cleaned my house before. I'm not going to leave my kids. They're just nice ladies, but.
And then something else I see slowed people down too, just so like other people are struggling with the same issues. Once you finally do decide, right, like we agree that so-and-so should take care of the kids if something happens to both of us, well, your assets are more than likely, if we're dealing with minor children, your assets are going to be going into a trust that we also create, right? So any real property you own, life insurance, investment accounts, like you're going to funnel all that into a trust. So if something happens to you and your spouse, you've decided who the guardian of your kids are going to be, or there's going to be a trust, and someone has to be in charge of that trust. Somebody has to be a trustee to manage your assets for the benefit and care of your minor children. And some people want their guardian to be the same person as the trustee, right? The person who has physical custody of the children would also be controlling your trust that benefits your children. Some people want that to be a different person, right? They want the guardian of their children to have to go to a person and say, hey, we need to pay for their school. We need to pay for this. Can you write a check, right? So sometimes for different reasons, you want those to be 2 people. Sometimes it makes more sense for it to be the same person, right? If you trust your kids enough to have someone be their guardian, sometimes the theory is, you trust them to handle the money for your children, right? Sometimes you have a lot of assets and you kind of want a professional. You want like a CPA or an attorney or an investment advisor. You want someone else to serve in that trustee position to manage those assets, make sure money is being used the way it needs to be, invested the way it needs to be, right? So I talk about that a lot with folks. And from a legal perspective, we can give you legal advice, but in the end, that's just a decision you end up having to make. But like Cassandra was saying, you can get something into place. You can, once you establish your estate plan, you don't have to redo it from scratch every year unless you win the $1.1 billion in the lottery or something. That you'd probably want to redo your estate plan if something like that happens. But once you've established an estate plan, you can make changes to it every year, every other year. You can keep it current. You can keep it fresh. But it sounds like you have that conversation a lot too, Cassandra.
I do. However, I do not have my own estate plan done. So this is inspiration. However, I don't have children. I have student loans, a mortgage, and a 2005 Impala with 250,000 miles. So
look, man, somebody's going to want those student loans. You got to. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right. But with clients, it's not just so when you're choosing people to be the guardians and the trustees, you can build directly into the document backup folks so that if that person is unwilling or unable when the time comes, there's already somebody else you've chosen as the next in line for that position. And then as far as the trust stuff goes, there's a lot of other decisions to about how specific you want to get about how your assets are to be used for the care of your children. You can be real specific, like just education and like their essential needs. Or you can choose to give that trustee some discretion over what's, necessary for the care of your kids. So a lot of decisions to be made.
And this is where I'll add, we talked about it a little bit before the break, but there's a lot of online services where you never speak to an attorney, you never talk to an attorney. Attorney doesn't review anything, and legal forms are made at your you answer some yes/no questions, you put in information, and they spit out forms for you. I have never been a big fan of those. We early on when those things started, we kind of went through the process and compared the cost with what we normally charge in a similar situation. And when I look at it, the cost is relatively the same. I think a lot of those sites, and there's several. I think a lot of those sites have like teaser rates where they'll say, "Hey, only whatever blank for a full estate plan." And then once you get in there, it's not a full estate plan, and there's some things they can't. There's a lot of things they can't handle. So I have never been a fan of that, but it is popular. We see a lot of folks do that. We've reviewed a lot of those, and the review never goes super well, right? We find a lot of things that we're unhappy with, or a lot of statutory references. Estate planning is still very state specific, right? There's some statutes that all states have adopted. There's some uniform trust statutes that make trust a little more uniform across states, but there's a lot of state specific things, right? I am not qualified to advise a New York resident on their estate plan because I am not licensed to practice in New York. But in North Carolina, we know that stuff, right? We know that forward and backward. But Morgan, I know we're coming up against a break. Mm-hmm. I think next we'll talk about what goes into an actual estate plan.
Yeah, and let's remind everybody too, our first 5 callers to the program today are going to get that 15-minute consult, no cost, no obligation. Maybe you've got questions about estate planning. You could use that 15-minute consult for that alone. So the number to call to get one of those spots, again, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Just leave your name, contact information, and if you're one of the first 5 callers, you're going to get that 15-minute consult, no charge. You can also email your questions to the show, questions@theoutlawlawyer.com. He's Josh Whitaker. Joe Hamer's over there, and we also have Cassandra Nicholas joining us from Morehead City, an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer. We'll be back right after this.